Well, hello there. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. I guess your day has just started, but how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here. It's a busy time, of course, with the album coming out six days ago. But it's awesome. We get to hear how much people are enjoying this album and really being rewarded by how much people are listening deeply and really paying attention to the little details, which is really important to us. So it's exciting times.
Yeah. Have you discovered some insights that people have discovered with this album that you were surprised about?
I think I'm surprised by the diversity of interpretation, especially in terms of lyrics, because a lot of lyrics that we write are intentionally open-ended enough to stimulate conversations in the mind. So, we're more interested in having conversations than talking at people and telling them what to think. So, it's been really interesting what some people have to say about, like, for instance, a song like Churches, where the perspective of who the main character is singing at is intentionally left up to interpretation, and the amount of different things we've heard about that song in particular is amazing. It sometimes is kind of funny, but it's amazing.
Yeah, what's the funniest thing you heard so far, if there's anything?
I mean, I don't know if it's funny, but there are a lot of people who firstly take it as purely religious, which is not. And then I saw a couple people get very offended as a result of that, thinking that it was intended to be like a blasphemous or an anti-Christian song or something like that. That's so far from anything we have in mind. And that's so unsilenced guys to be attacking faith or anything like that.
Yeah, that's like more of a maybe even like a black metal thing, I guess, if you think about
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
that.
Exactly. We're not Behemoth or something. We're just
Yeah.
writing songs about, human experience.
Yeah. Well,
But I
yeah.
guess faith is part of that, so.
Yeah, and I guess if you want to, have people talk about your songs and so on and making them abstract, that's maybe part of it that I guess a good song provokes discussion or something like that.
Yeah, of course, of course. And while there are things that absolutely, surprise me, I can't actually say they're incorrect because we did write them with the idea that you can apply them to the journey of your own life. And if faith or struggles with faith has been a really important part of your life, then there you go. Then that's your interpretation, and that's great.
Yeah. Well, actually, I wanted to ask you about that song in general because I thought it just really stood out to me because it has such an uplifting mood. So is there anything other than the lyrics you can talk about that song? Like how did you come up with the instrumental parts and so on?
Sure. That song actually has a special history for me because first of all, to back up, I have a very close relationship with instruments, and I view instruments in an almost spiritual way, and I think each instrument I play has some spirit to it. And if I play the instrument with an open mind and heart, I can get in touch with what the instrument wants to say. So I had just acquired this. I don't know if you can see it. This synthesizer. It's
Yeah.
the second one. It's a Prophet Rev 2 from Sequential David Smith Instruments. And I got it. I went home and I unboxed it and I plugged it in and I played the first sound that it just happened to open up on and tweak some things. And I was immediately inspired. And I recorded a minute and a half, which was the verse and chorus of Churches, but actually just as a demo, a sound demo, to show Tom, this cool little toy I had gotten. And I played the bass line on the Moog, the top one, and I sent it to Tom, and he said, "That's amazing. We should keep it as a song idea." And I'd never intended for it to be a Silent Sky song, but from that kernel, minute and a half snippet, we went on Zoom together and we wrote probably my favorite chorus we had ever done with Silent Skies. Like I felt like there was lightning being captured, in that moment. But then from there on out, it actually was a somewhat difficult process just to make the song feel like Silent Skies for both of us, because it's so kind of radically different in its vibe, and it's a very vibrant, kind of colorful sort of song. So there were some decisions we made, like we added a lot of piano just to kind of bring it back into our universe a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's kind of testament to the mentality that we really have no walls up when it comes to Silent Skies. If there's something that we want to do, we do it, or we find a way to make it work. So that was very much kind of part of the process of that song. Is we This is very new for us, but we want to do it. We want to go into this kind of synth pop direction, and there are a lot of guitars in that song. We want to bring in guitars. We want to bring in real drums. So how do we do that in a way that feels true to who we are? And it's as simple as that, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's a yeah, I guess the story is really it's always fascinating when there's like more to a song, but in that sense, do you feel like this uplifting mood was maybe created by the fact that you were, unboxing and getting to new instruments, sorry.
I think there is a thing like that, and I think most of the most colorful, uplifting moments in the album come from me experimenting with something new and being inspired and kind of following the energy of that process. For instance, the real me, the last maybe minute and a half of the song, the big chorus and the outro, I was playing mandolin on that. I played like 8 tracks of mandolin on that song, and I hadn't touched my mandolin for about 10 years. And just I think getting picking that instrument up and playing on it, it did something in the brain. It kind of stimulated creativity in an interesting way, and that song took on a very particular kind of energy as a result. And I will say in general that the sound really informs my creative process. I became really interested in sound and texture and sound design because I wanted to find new ways to express myself that didn't involve, the 12 notes that we're all used to playing. There's so much more to music than just the order in which you put those 12 notes. So I was thinking a lot about sound colors and what are ways that we can expand the Silent Skies universe in less obvious ways. And part of that became bringing in all kinds of instruments. I play the shakuhachi on a song, a Japanese wind flute. I play recorder on a couple songs. I play guitar on every song, and a lot of this thing, which is a modular synthesizer. That's all over the album as well. It's just all these different ways of making music that I find inspiring.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to me when people use the recorder for anything because I guess most people in the world learn it in high school and it sounds like absolutely not what you want it to be there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, exactly. I in elementary school in the States, that's when I became familiar with the recorder, and I actually took it very seriously at the time. I got a four-piece set, I think sopranino, soprano, alto, tenor, and I got them. I actually genuinely loved them, but then I didn't touch them for 15 years or something. And we were working on Dancing in the Dark, the second bonus track, and I just kind of looked over and I saw the box of the case of recorders. I was thinking, I wonder what can I do with this? So I just picked it up and played some phrases, and then I ran the phrases into the modular and did all kinds of things like, playing them backwards and morphing the sound. So it doesn't actually sound much like a recorder by the end of the process. But it started from an origin point that I never would have imagined doing even, 6 months before that. But it just, it keeps it fresh, it keeps it interesting, and the recorder is a beautiful instrument. I think actually it gets a hard reputation from people who learn it in school and resent it or just hate the sound. But well played, it actually is really cool because it's a little bit nasal. It's a little bit aggressive, but it's also has this simple purity to it. So it kind of manages to capture both of those elements of the spectrum in one relatively simple instrument.
Yeah, and I guess a lot, at least in school, depends on the fact that most people just buy the really cheap ass like plasticky ones, which don't really sound like anything. So, but are those the ones
Yeah.
you use now, the ones that you also use in school?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, I was a member of the recorder ensemble in school, which was essentially like, I don't know, it was a school group of maybe 10 kids playing everything from the sopranino, which is an absolutely adorable little thing. It's just like yay big, all the way to the bass recorder, which kind of almost looks like a bassoon in its size. And I really enjoyed it actually, and I was really only listening to classical music in school. I think it took me till maybe the age of 12 or 13 to listen to anything that wasn't classical music. And a big part of early music, maybe not even classical music, but pre-classical era, was the recorder and this kind of I associate it with an English sound. I don't know if it's necessarily English, but to me it's got this like traditional English kind of very, very old character to it. And it almost sounds hymnal to me. Like it sounds like a hymn, but in these kind of odd sounding flutes. So I think it's awesome. But I love wind instruments. Like I got the shakuhachi for the same reason. I
Mhm.
just love wind instruments. And that is the hardest instrument I've ever played, for sure. I played French horn for 6 years, and that's supposed to be the hardest instrument. Shakuhachi is way harder.
Really?
It took me, I think, 3 hours to make a sound out of it. Just sitting here. I was filming myself too. I had like a phone camera up, and I was just filming. Why can't I make a sound watching my lips? Like what's going on? It was so fascinating.
I have actually no clue what that instrument like what it looks like. So how does it
Here,
work? 'Cause-
I'll get it. One sec.
Oh, cool. Oh, so you
So
blow and oh yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm not gonna play it now because it's
No, that
a
makes sense.
pain and I'm gonna embarrass myself. But it kind of looks like a recorder. It
Yeah.
has very few holes, one, two, three, four, and then a thumb hole. And you blow across it. You probably can't see this, but it's like a flute. If you're familiar with how you blow into a flute, you don't blow into a flute. You blow over a flute, and then it's the kind of the way the air hits this surface that makes a sound. And the shakuhachi is the same way, but the surface you have to blow over is, I think, a tenth of the size as a flute. So it's a really, really, really small point that you have to hit. And then with only four holes, you can play a full chromatic scale because you put your finger, maybe you put this finger halfway over the hole. And then maybe you put these two fingers halfway over the holes. And then you bend with your mouth. It's so complicated. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And if you look up on YouTube what people do with this instrument, oh my gosh, it's incredible.
Yeah.
I use it on the song Just Above the Clouds for those kind of
Yeah. Uh-huh.
fluty breaks, and it's a very simplistic version of playing that instrument, but it's nice.
It's good, yeah. I actually because I play some instruments, at least flute is one of them, so I'm largely
Okay,
fascinated by
okay.
how this works. My instinct was immediately, but wait, those holes, they look so huge, but I guess it makes sense if you can make other sort of sounds with them as well. So yeah.
Exactly. They're huge because you have to be able to do half holes and three-quarter holes and all these fine increments. Because if you just play the holes, you have a pentatonic scale
Yeah.
tuned to whatever this flute is tuned to. I think this one is a D pentatonic. But you can actually do beyond a chromatic scale with it. It's amazing. I really encourage you to just find some videos of these like masters. These it's very tied to Zen tradition. So you
Mhm.
can find these Zen masters playing these incredible sounding pieces of music. And actually playing the shakuhachi is meditation for them. So there's a traditional act of just playing a note where you hold all the holes down and you just play long whole notes kind of, and that's meditation. And I actually was practicing that last year. I was doing a lot of this kind of, it's called robuki. I was doing a lot of this meditation. And
Yeah.
I find meditation important and useful. And I love all these kind of like various ways to enhance the quality of the mind because life is hard and we need it. But that actually became a very, very powerful thing to do. And I haven't done it in a while. So maybe I
Yeah.
should get back to it.
You also mentioned earlier that you in school you were mostly listening to classical music, which I also understand because I used to be like that as well. But then my dad
Oh,
introduced
okay.
me to progressive rock, and it sort of clicked for me. And I was
Mm,
wondering how that was for you actually, because I guess in, especially in the 70s Prague, some of these, like especially keyboardists, they have a more like classical music kind of approach to playing piano and keyboards and synths and such.
yeah, that's so funny. It was my dad too, and it was also progressive rock. I don't know what the progressive rock choice was for you. For me, he played me a lot of Pink Floyd and a lot of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, which was kind of a niche pick, especially because he's not like a prog head really,
Yeah.
but he really loved Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer kind of awakened me to the idea that you don't have to sacrifice the technicality to play rock music, because I had a friend who showed me AC/DC like at a summer camp, and I actually appreciated it. I thought it was kind of like breaking down all the walls and just playing stuff that feels good. I thought that was interesting, but it didn't really captivate me in the same way. But Pink Floyd with the sound textures and Emerson Lake and Palmer with the technicality had a big impact on me. I was maybe 12 years old when I really got into those bands, and then I went kind of straight over to Dream Theater from that point on.
Hmm.
And Dream Theater like absolutely expanded my horizons in so many different directions, because it was through Dream Theater that I fell in love with metal. I didn't really understand metal before then. Even Iron Maiden actually didn't make that much sense to me as a kid. But then Dream Theater made it make sense. And Dream Theater was so much more technical than even Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Rush and all these other bands that I knew. So it's like, wow, you can actually be just as technical as in classical music, but also have this kind of power and energy that comes with playing metal. And it just completely changed the trajectory of my life at that point. And I wouldn't be here, releasing Silent Skies music, talking to you about it if it wasn't for discovering Dream Theater, all those years ago.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, for me, it was actually my dad introduced me to Yes when I was like 9 years
Yes.
old or
Okay. All right.
something. So it
All
was
right.
like very intense at first, but it was like so beautiful.
My dad tried to get me into Yes, but to be honest, I don't know why I struggle with the vocals.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a, I won't say too airy because I love airy voices. I'm not sure what it is. And I love Haken, and Ross sounds very similar
Yeah, he
at
does that
times.
too.
So I'm not entirely sure what the hang up is there. And probably if I went back it would make a lot of sense to me. But he also showed me the Doors, who are not, I wouldn't say they're a progressive rock band, but they still like really captivated me. And I think Jim Morrison had an energy to the vocals that I just really wanted to hear. And maybe I didn't hear that with John Anderson, so it didn't, quite do the same thing for me. Maybe, I don't know. I'm just conjecturing. It's hard to understand the mind of a 12-year-old.
Yeah, well, I recommend like especially if you like into things like meditation and such. John Anderson is like, such a hippie kind of person. But
Sure, yeah. I mean, I know Close to the Edge and Fragile, and I actually quite like Relayer. Relayer is really quite good.
yeah,
But
interesting.
yeah, I'm due for a revisit.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I was also wondering, we did, well, not me personally, but another journalist did an interview with you before from my magazine, where you mentioned that you have like a conservatory degree in film scoring and composition. And of course, like there's no denying that your music is very cinematographic in this project, but how much does that play a role in actually writing the music for this project, Silent Skies?
I would say really very little, um with some exceptions. I A lot of what I learned in conservatory has to do with just writing for instruments. I think some of the stuff I got the most out of in conservatory was this special qualities of instruments and how to write for them in the most successful ways. And I think actually on the first album, that was more of a factor on Satellites because I wrote out pretty much all of the cello parts for Raphael Weinroth Brown to play. And so obviously a lot of that education for string writing went into that, and also the use of extended techniques and how to communicate ideas on paper in the most efficient way so a string player can read the chart really quickly rather than having to parse through a whole bunch of nonsense to get to what you're actually trying to say. But the cinematic side of things, I think, just comes from me, I would say, and what I like, and what I and Tom, what we want to do with our music. And it comes from specific composers as well whom we love. We're really into what I would say is can be called the neoclassical movement, or that means so many different things throughout history. But right now, I think it's like composers who kind of grew up with electronic music,
Yeah.
so they have a very different way of thinking about classical music. And Olafur Arnalds is probably the best example. And Olafur is kind of atop the pantheon for both Tom and I in terms of how he writes and produces music and everything. I mean, we're massive fanboys. It's kind of sickening, actually. But I think that kind of music informed us a lot as to what we're doing, because Olafur writes for some films and some TV, but he does a lot of solo albums that somehow seem to evoke similar. They do something similar for the mind. It's like they encourage you to have it be the soundtrack of your own film, whatever is happening in your life and the experiences you're leading. That becomes the film, and his music becomes the soundtrack. And people say this phrase all the time, and this was the soundtrack to my life. But it's a very, very real and vivid thing with music like this neoclassical stuff, like Max Richter as well, and the late Johan Johansson. May he rest in peace. And it's that kind of idea that the music can be so powerful in that way that it can actually be a very natural complement to whatever's going on in your life and inform what's happening in your life. Because I think a great score can inform the picture, and the score can do things that the visual media cannot, and it can actually shape the way you experience the film. And some of my favorite examples in film scoring are that way, where you just kind of you view what's happening a little bit differently because the music lets you know that you're not seeing the whole picture, that something else is going on. And I think Silent Sky's music can do that as well, where it can inform you to your experience of the human condition. And we really want to encourage listeners to ask questions of themselves, to do that introspective process. And I think it's really hard to do introspection in 2023 because there's so much just stuff all the time. There's so much stimulus, there's so much obligation. You always have to do something. We never just sit at rest. So if Silent Skies can help people just sit for 45 minutes in the evening with the headphones on, listening and thinking and reflecting, then I think it's fulfilled its purpose in a way.
Well, you mentioned film composers, and like how movies speak. But do you have any kind of favorite film score out there?
I think if Tom was sitting here next to me, we would both say at the same time Interstellar. Um, Interstellar has captivated both of us very much, and it's a beautiful film. It's a thoughtful film. What I really love about Interstellar as it relates to us is when Christopher Nolan was talking to Hans Zimmer about the film, and at the very early stages and having him come up with the theme, he said, this is a story about a father and son. He said nothing about space travel.
Mhm.
And the whole idea of the sci-fi element of the film really kind of becomes a backdrop for human drama. And it's a very small story while also being, huge galaxy-wide story. And I think Silent Skies actually does that too in our music, I think, because we're always thinking about big atmospheres, and our approach to sound design means that we are actively trying to conjure a universe for the listener. if you put on the headphones or really good speakers, you should feel completely immersed, but you should also feel an intimacy. And you should feel that at the core of everything, if you strip out 160 tracks of synthesizers and guitars and strings and everything, you should find a very intimate human story at the core of it. And that story, in its simplest form, is told by one piano and one voice, which is how we start a lot of our songs. A lot of our songs start with one piano and one voice. We make it a great song, and then we grow it in whatever way the song demands. But the idea of that human story at the core, I love all films like that. I think my favorite films are films that are striking in some huge, extravagant way, but really can be boiled down to a very, of they don't have to take place in their extravagant universe.
Yeah.
I think The Expanse is my favorite TV show for that reason. I think The Expanse doesn't have to be set in space to be a great story. I think it could be set, just here on Earth, and you could just delve into the relationships between people and the relationships between governments, and you would have a great, almost Game of Thronesy kind of story,
Mhm.
but without the fantasy.
Yeah.
But then you put it in space and you pair it with these incredible, battle sequences and the stunning animations, and then of course it becomes something else entirely. But
Yeah.
long-winded answer. Hope that made sense.
Yeah, yeah, it does. How much do you feel like Silent Sky's magic is because of you and Tom maybe geeking out of music and your chemistry and all that sort of stuff?
I think that the Silent Sky sounds the way it does because of our geekiness towards music and both our own creative process, but also us as listeners. And we I know a lot of colleagues I have in the music industry who can't listen to music. You'll find that very common. That
Yeah.
a lot of musicians say, I don't listen to music. I can't listen to music. I work on music all day. I don't want to listen to music. But I've never been that way. Even the times when I get burnt out with making music, which does happen, I'm always listening because I love music. And Tom and I have both listened to so many different styles of music. I think between the two of us, we have probably nearly every genre covered. That's no exaggeration. I think if you put our two combined, listening tastes together, we have classical music, hip hop, pop, electronic, folk, singer songwriter, metal, and of course, metal itself is an entire universe. And I think between the two of us, we have very nearly all of metal covered. I mean, and I love jazz music, and that's a big part of my playing as well. So there's just so much to draw from. It's not, if we were only listening to metal, or if we were only listening to the exact kind of music we make, I think it would be very easy to run out of inspiration. But we're always drawing from different places, and there are always these little ways that different kinds of music find their way into what we're doing. Like the shakuhachi actually became something we were interested in before I bought one, because Tom actually listens to a lot of Zen meditation music. I think that's what he listens to more than anything else. Like just just little flutes going and all that kind of stuff. So he's always loved that sound, and I have as well. I listen to a lot of that stuff as well, and it finds its way in somehow. It finds its way into a song that's otherwise, I would say, basically a dream pop song. But then somehow shakuhachi and meditation music finds its way in. So you can always keep things fresh and interesting and keep the keep the spark alive, so to speak, by having a wide perspective and a larger worldview. And I think every musician should strive to do that. I think that if you feel like you've consumed all the music that there is to offer, you're missing something for sure.
What are your other, do you have any touring plans? I guess not, right?
Well, it's taken us a long time to get to this point, but we finally have a team who's committed to making this happen for us. So really just in, the last couple of months working towards the release of this album, we've signed a bunch of deals with, especially in Scandinavia, but also throughout Europe and North America as well. We've signed, among other things, with booking agents. So it will happen. We're finally at the point where I can say it will happen. And I think it's going to be really special. And we've been talking about live performance for like 5 years at this point. So it's, it's about time to make it happen. And we no longer have the pandemic as an excuse. That was a very useful excuse for 2 years. And now we actually have to do it.
Well, I'm looking forward to whenever you guys would visit Helsinki in the future, near future, hopefully. But yeah, our time is up, I guess. So do you have any last thoughts you want to share to your fans?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I hope you enjoy the album. I hope that you are able to give it the time and attention that it deserves because, I do think that there's a lot going on and it may be a little difficult to digest, but it rewards repeated listenings. At least, when I talk to people who've heard the album, they seem to feel the same way. So hopefully it speaks to you. Hopefully, you're able to take that time and pay the attention, but it's okay if not. It's okay if you don't like it. It's fine. It's not a big deal. But it would be a beautiful thing if we can connect with more people.